The Melungeons, the Sentinels. On the most isolated ridges live the Melungeons. For centuries their origin was a mystery. Dark skin, blue eyes, and European features, living in the hills long before the first settlers arrived. But the real mystery is what they protect. It is said Melungeon communities were formed to act as sentinels, guarding soil portals that emit a blue light during specific full moons. They don't dislike strangers out of hate, but out of fear of what those strangers might accidentally let in. The coffin tree, deep in the forests of Kentucky, stands an ancient oak known as the coffin tree. Legend says anyone who sleeps in its shadow will dream of the exact date of their death. The horror is physical. The tree grows around objects. Pocket watches from the 1800s and Confederate uniform fragments have been found fused into the wood, as if the tree consumed the solid matter. The soil around it is sterile. Nothing grows. It is a biological drain of life force. The phantom radios. If you are driving a mountain road at night and your radio begins to tune into stations playing 1920s jazz or news from wars long ended, turn it off immediately. The phantom radio phenomenon is common in high quartz areas. The danger starts when the radio begins to broadcast conversations happening inside your car, describing your clothes and your destination. The radio isn't picking up the past, it's picking up whatever is sitting in the back seat with you. The blood paths. There are trails that do not appear on satellite maps but manifest before exhausted hikers. These are the blood paths, where the earth is unnaturally crimson and the smell of iron is overwhelming. Animals avoid these trails at all costs. Some believe these are the mountain's veins. Those who enter a blood path report the great silence. No birds, no wind. Only the sound of your own heart, which eventually begins to beat in rhythm with the ground beneath your feet. The Bell Witch Legacy. We begin the second phase in Adams, Tennessee. The legend of the Bell Witch isn't just a campfire story. It's one of the only poltergeist cases in American history recognized by a future president, Andrew Jackson. But the truth is darker. The entity never left. It retreated into the limestone caverns that vein the mountains. Modern visitors report that inside these caves, compasses spin violently and audio recorders capture whispers in dialects that haven't been spoken on Earth for millennia. The witch wasn't a woman. She was something the mountain spit out to claim a family as its prey. The Iron Children. In the disappearance files of the Appalachians, a disturbing pattern emerges. Children who vanish on impossible peaks and reappear days later in locations an elite hiker couldn't reach. Even more chilling are their testimonies. Many speak of iron men, or glowing people, who fed them fruit that shimmered in the dark. They don't feel the cold even in the snow. When they return, their clothes are pristine, but they seem to have forgotten how to be human. Folklore experts suggest they were taken to the Undermountain, a realm existing within the folds of time. The Wampus Cat. Many confuse it with a cougar, but the Wampus Cat is far more sinister. Described in Cherokee legends as a cursed soul, modern sightings depict a six-legged beast capable of moving faster than the human eye can track. Its cry isn't a growl, it's a human lament distorted by a feline throat. If you see tracks of a large cat, but notice the front paws have long needle-like fingers, you aren't tracking an animal. You are being hunted by a myth. The Flesh Gators. While the Skinwalker is a myth of the Southwest, Something similar migrated to the Appalachian caves during the westward expansion. In the east they are called flesh gators. They mimic human forms but fail at the proportions. Their arms are too long. Their joints bend the wrong way. They hide in your peripheral vision. If you feel someone behind you but see nothing when you turn, look up. They have learned that humans rarely look at the highest branches. The whispering fog. Appalachian fog is dense, but the whispering fog is different. It moves against the wind and carries a sickly yellow tint. When it envelopes you, you hear the voices of dead loved ones calling for help. They say they are cold. If you follow the voice, you step off the cliffside. Military personnel training in the region report this fog has electromagnetic properties that erase short-term memory. You enter it as an adult and emerge thinking you are a child again. The Talipo, one of the darkest stories from the isolated cabins, is the Talipo. It isn't just folklore. Modern hunters describe a small creature with metallic claws and giant yellow eyes that stalks those who take things from the forest without permission. It doesn't want your food, it wants what you stole. The sound of claws scratching rhythmically against the cabin wood is the final warning. Talipo, Talipo, I want my tail back. The Black Waters. There are lakes in West Virginia where the water is black as ink, yet perfectly clear in a glass. At the bottom of these lakes, divers have reported seeing structures that look like temples or submerged cities that shouldn't exist. The danger here is hypnosis. The water seems to call to people. This is why many missing persons are found near water, or worse, never found, because the black waters do not return what sinks into them. The headless horror of Virginia. In the narrow passes of Virginia, there are reports of a headless entity that isn't a ghost, but a biological creature. It runs on 4 legs and uses the sound of a crying baby to lure people to the edge of ravines. Unlike other myths, this one leaves physical evidence. Trees stripped of bark by powerful claws and animal carcasses left in macabre displays, like offerings to a hungry, ancient god. The coal mine screams. Deep beneath the surface of West Virginia lies a labyrinth of abandoned coal mines. But miners who worked these veins in the 1920s left behind more than just rusted tools. They reported the hunger, a low rhythmic thumping that seemed to come from inside the rock itself. Even today, if you stand near a sealed mine shaft at dusk, you can hear what sounds like hundreds of pickaxes hitting the stone in perfect unison. But there is no one down there. The mountain has memorized the sounds of the men it buried alive, and it plays them back like a broken record. The copper-eyed strangers. There are accounts from isolated homesteaders about visitors who knock on doors during heavy snowstorms. They look human, but their eyes have a distinct, metallic copper sheen. They don't ask for food, they ask for permission to observe the hearth. Those who let them in describe a terrifying silence that follows. The strangers don't speak, they just stare at the fire until sunrise, and then walk into the woods without leaving footprints in the deep snow. To see a copper-eyed stranger is a sign that your lineage in the mountains is being marked. The humming monoliths. Hikers in the Great Smoky Mountains sometimes stumble upon smooth black stones the size of a man, standing perfectly upright in clearings where no machinery could reach. These aren't ancient ruins, they feel warm to the touch. If you press your ear against them, you'll hear a mechanical hum, like a distant power grid. Some conspiracy theorists believe these are cooling vents for a massive underground facility, while locals believe they are tuning forks used by the mountain to keep the local wildlife in a state of permanent, docile confusion. The vanishing creeks in the Appalachians, water doesn't always flow down. There are ghost creeks that appear after a heavy rain but flow in a complete circle. If you follow the water, you will find yourself back exactly where you started, but the sun will be in a different position than it should be. The water in these creeks is said to be heavy. It doesn't reflect your face, it reflects the face of someone standing behind you. If you drink from a vanishing creek, you lose the ability to see the color green, leaving you colorblind in a world of emerald forest. The lantern men, long before flashlights, there were the lantern men. Not to be confused with the Brown Mountain Lights, these are distinct silhouettes of men carrying old oil lamps through the treeline. They always appear in groups of 3. If you see their light, do not attempt to catch up to them. They are leads, entities designed to pull travelers off the main path and into the laurel thickets where the ground is soft and the bogs are deep. Their lanterns don't burn oil. They burn the memories of the people they've lured into the dark. The silver string fences, deep in the hollers, you might find fences made not of barbed wire, but of a strange, thin silver thread that never rusts. Birds won't perch on them, and deer will starve before jumping over them. These fences don't mark property lines. They mark containment zones. The elders say that inside these silver perimeters, the rules of biology are suspended. Flowers grow with human teeth, and the wind sounds like a choir of children. If you find a silver fence, stay on the outside. Whatever is being kept in wants you to be its next guest. The log cabin mimic. Imagine finding a perfectly preserved log cabin in a place where no road leads. The fire is going, the table is set, but there is no one there. This is a mimic house. It is a predatory structure, a lure created by the mountain's ancient energy to trap the weary. If you enter and fall asleep, you won't wake up in a cabin. You'll wake up in a cave miles underground, with the realization that the walls of the house were actually the ribs of something much larger. The iron ore giants. The Appalachian soil is rich in iron, and some legends say the mountains are actually the sleeping bodies of giants from a forgotten era. In areas with high iron deposits, hikers report rock shifts that sound like a colossal heartbeat. When the iron ore is exposed to lightning, people report seeing gargantuan shapes moving in the clouds above the peaks, limbs made of stone and storm. They aren't ghosts. They are the original architects of the ridge, and they are starting to wake up. The braided grass. In the high meadows, you may find patches of tall grass that have been intricately braided into complex patterns, far too small for human hands to have made. These are nesting grounds. The creatures that make them are never seen, but they leave behind gifts. Small trinkets made of bone and polished river stone. If you take a gift, you must leave something of yours behind. If you don't, the braiders will follow you home and begin braiding the hair of your children while they sleep. The radio silence zones. There are valleys in the Appalachians where no electronic device works. Not because of a lack of signal, but because the devices die. Batteries drain in seconds. Digital watches spin backward. These are the radio silence zones. Scientists call them magnetic anomalies, but the Cherokee called them the breath of the old ones. In these zones, the only way to communicate is through shouting, but even then your voice only travels a few feet before it is swallowed by the heavy, ancient air. The clockwork insects deep in the humid valleys of the Blue Ridge, hikers have reported a sound that doesn't belong in nature, the sound of gears turning and metal clicking. These are the clockwork insects. Those who have caught them describe creatures that look like cicadas or beetles, but upon closer inspection, their shells are made of polished brass and their wings are thin sheets of iridescent mica. They don't eat leaves, they cluster around electronic devices and copper wiring. Some say they are ancient surveillance tools, left behind by a civilization that lived under these mountains long before the first humans arrived. The crying trees in certain groves, usually near old, forgotten cemeteries, the maples and oaks perform a gruesome ritual. They don't produce sap, they produce a thick, salty fluid that tastes and smells exactly like human tears. This weeping happens mostly in the autumn. Locals believe these trees are connected to the root systems of the graves nearby, acting as a biological conduit for the grief buried in the soil. If you lean your ear against the bark of a crying tree, you won't hear the wind, you'll hear a muffled, collective sobbing coming from deep within the wood. The missing notch. There is a peak in the Great Smoky Mountains that appears on every physical map but is missing from every GPS and satellite image. It is known as the missing notch. When pilots fly over it, their instruments black out for exactly 7 seconds. On the ground, those who find the notch report a terrifying visual anomaly. The sky above it is always midnight black, even at high noon. It is a pocket of dead space, where the sun's light refuses to enter, and anything that walks into that shadow comes out, changed, with eyes that no longer reflect light. The porch sitter. Among the many abandoned cabins in the hollers, there is one legend that keeps even the bravest hunters away, the porch sitter. It is a figure that appears on the porch of a ruined home, rocking back and forth in a chair that isn't there. It looks like an old man from a distance, but as you get closer you realize its skin is the texture of dried bark and it has no mouth. It doesn't attack, it simply points a long wooden finger at you. Wherever it points, you will find a tragedy waiting for you within the next 48 hours. It is the mountain's way of marking the doomed. The ancient hum. Conclusion of Part 2. As we conclude this second chapter of our journey into the dark heart of the Appalachians, we are left with a single vibrating truth, the ancient hum. It is a low-frequency sound that resonates through the bedrock of the entire range. It is the sound of the mountains breathing. It reminds us that we are guests on a sleeping giant that is slowly beginning to stir. The shadows are growing longer and the rules are becoming harsher. Stay tuned for Part 3, where we will cross the final boundary into the territory where no map can guide you. This is U.S. Dark Files.